Good evening, everyone. Tonight, this is now the 6 o'clock on August 27th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Sandwich Board of Appeals. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The Board of Appeals is comprised of 5 regular members and 1 alternate member. The Board of Appeals can have up to 4 alternate members. Any decision of this board requires a 2/3 vote. 2/3 of 5 is 4. If only 4 members vote, the vote would have to be unanimous. If 5 members vote, 1 member could dissent. This meeting is live and streamed on Sandwich Community Television's website and on local Channel 9. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on SCTV website at www.sandwichtv.org tomorrow. The board asks that if anyone is recording this meeting, please let me know. None seen. Okay. There are no minutes to approve this evening, so we'll move right along to old business. Special permit request number 24-16, 40 Leonard Road. Cheryl Kroll, trustee of the 56 Leonard Road Nominee Trust. This is a continued meeting which we opened on July 23rd of this year. Jim Killian and Mary Foley were not at the July 23rd meeting, but have listened to the audio tape and have signed an affidavit to this effect. Ralph, Leanne, do you have any updates to make or make comments?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up to the applicant's representative, Paul Revere Esquire. We did receive an updated communication from Mr. Revere, and we also received a letter from A.M. Wilson Associates, Inc. in regard to this project. We do have one comment letter from Dave DeCanto. Last Wednesday evening under Dave DeCanto, who's Director of Department of National Resources. Last Wednesday evening, under executive session, the Sandwich Conservation Commission voted to rescind the need for the filing of a new notice of intent for the project at 40 Leonard Road. The certified technical memo submitted by the applicant's engineer stating that the proposed garage will be elevated at a minimum of 24 inches over the existing dune, and that no fill, hardener, concrete, etc. will be placed on the floor of the garage, gave the commissioners the information that they needed. Let me know if any questions. Okay, we'll open it up to Attorney Revere.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. I'm going to speak briefly, and then I'm really going to turn it over to the one you want to hear from, the engineer who did the plan in this matter. Here we're dealing with a special permit request for a flood zone special permit. I note in looking at special permits, the Sandwich zoning bylaw states in section 1330 that special permit should be, quote, normally granted. I wish I had that in my matter in Chatham that I went to trial with, but I found that very interesting. The board has done a number of recent permits of this kind. I bring out specifically in May 15th, 2021, 20 Quiet Lane was very similar to this, a floodplain lot, and that was approved. When you look at this, the standards are the susceptibility of the proposed facility and the contents to flood damage and the effect of such damage upon the site and surrounding properties. And note, that's the susceptibility of the proposed facility, not the lot per se, and the contents to flood damage and the effect of such damage upon the site and surrounding property. And as I read that, in other words, the facility has to be damaged, meaning the building here, and then impact neighboring properties. The second thing is the availability of alternative locations for the proposed use, which are not subject to flooding or erosion. As you'll see, most of this property is within the floodplain. And it's an interesting floodplain in itself because it's not what I'll say, the Atlantic Ocean, meaning Cape Cod Bay. It's the Atlantic Ocean, meaning Barnstable Harbor, flooding wildly to the west escaping Barnstable and jumping its way into Sandwich to do the property. Dan can speak to a bit of that. The necessity of a waterfront location does not apply at all. And finally, the determination that the relief request is the minimum necessary. It was pointed out in here, and I think it's important, there are a list of permits that you're required to have. The first two are particularly relevant here, and that is an order of conditions pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act and an order of conditions pursuant to the local bylaw. Actually, I put them in reverse order than the way they're listed. If you look at the file of this matter, back originally, Josh Wrigley wrote to you at the first time this was up for a hearing that the Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions for the project. Okay? There is no question that they did issue that. He then said there are still some unresolved issues and they need some more information. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And today we had the letter from last week about the executive session meeting, wherein those issues were resolved, resolving complaints that had been made in litigation with the Conservation Commission. So the property has an order of conditions. It also, and the order of conditions is somewhat interesting because it does say the whole site is a dune. It's always been a dune. There's no issue of that. That's been around since 1985. That was said to the Conservation Commission in 2022. And if anybody wants the exact minutes of the 2022 meeting, the moment when Dan said it, I can give you the exact time period. But that's always been true. This is nothing but throwing smoke and mirrors mentioning that exist elsewhere. And the property has a notice of non-significance only for the septic system area. So that isn't covered by an order of conditions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan, because Dan's really much better at explaining this, and you're probably already bored with hearing it from a lawyer. So here you go, Dan.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Dan Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and also a civil engineer, and we run Down Cape Engineering out of Yarmouth Port. Down Cape has been involved on this site on and off since 1993. Long history with the project. Mr. Wyman had hired my father and Dave Tulane to work on it back in the day, and they got a permit. They let the permit expire, unfortunately. We got them another permit about 6 years ago or 8 years ago. They let that one expire, unfortunately, but, and this is all the conservation I'm talking about. They never actually pulled a building permit until this is going to be a good effort at this point. So we got them another conservation permit finally. And in the highest board, this being the zoning board, does have to look at certain minor aspects of the site. Just as way of background, you guys probably deal with a lot of flood zones and a lot of coastal dunes, and especially on the barrier beaches in town where you get direct wave action, big rollers coming in, life and limb at the mercy of the waves. This, if you look at the notice of non-significance that was signed by the Conservation Commission, initially it was went all the way up to Jim Mahala, the head of the DEP, had signed off on the notice of non-significance, but you've got mean high water out here, a huge primary coastal dune, way in the back some secondary dunes, and then you can see the back of the secondary dune transitioning to maritime forest. Right in the language of that letter, they discussed how far it was away from the ocean. It's way back. And the site was transitioning to a maritime forest. So it's turning from a dune, and that may take another 800,000 years, we don't know. But just the point is, this isn't an active shifting sands type of a dune, it's a technical dune. There's just enough sand, veneer, windblown, to have it be under the Act, and the Conservation Commission approved everything. And then finally, the last few little items they've signed off on. So in my opinion, we're in good order with conservation and properly before this board. So what does the zoning board look at pursuant to 4300 in the zoning, 4352, 4355, and 4390? You need some information to make your findings. Per 4352, a special permit is required for new construction of a single-family home in the floodplain overlay district in Sandwich. As shown on the conservation-approved site plan, which I assume you have, but here's a copy here. You can see that there's a Zone X here that nicks the garage, but the majority of the site is in an AE elevation 14. This is a backwater flood zone, as we explained. It actually comes across Sandy Neck Road and backfills in here and floods. It isn't coming across from the huge dunes in front. Those will protect from a northeaster. It's just still water flooding slowly coming up into the back. And we went over this carefully with conservation. We discussed it because it is important. You don't want to flood out your septic system. You can see that the top of the septic is at 14, and the base flood elevation is AE 14. So you're actually a touch above with the top of the septic system there. And that's an extremely conservative value. The base flood is around 11. And the only reason it went to 14 was they have what they call wave setup. And when they, after Superstorm Sandy, they remodeled, the consultants all, cranked up their calculators and put some wave setup on this. So the base flood is unchanged since when we last permitted it, but the wave setup did push it up to the 14 level now. But again, the chances of waves setting up, coming all the way across Barnstable Harbor for the amount of time that the storm would have to hit to flood that level is very, very low chance. So that's the back information on it. We're way back of the dune. We're in a secondary dune right where it's transitioning into maritime forest. We're on the edge of the flood zone. It's not the velocity. It's not the limit of moderate wave action. It's way back in the minimal still water flood zone, which I think would differentiate it from many other projects in town. Construction of the single-family house with an attached garage is what we're looking to do. It's AE 14 per the maps, again, clearly shown on the plan and explained to the board. And I went over the Conservation Commission exactly how that changed, and they carefully measured that when they did their notice of non-significance on the dune. If you look back at the tapes, we went over all that very carefully. No mistakes were made. It was very clear and well thought out. So just to get back, and I'm reading, just paraphrasing from the June 20th memo that you had the filing, you'll note that this has been carefully designed to meet all the requirements of the Mass Building Code, Board of Health, Conservation Commission, Title V, NHESP, and FEMA standards, and also local zoning guidelines for construction in the flood zone and the applicable resource areas. So, as is required in not all flood zones, but certainly all coastal dunes, we're on an open structure. And what that does is allow the dune to move freely underneath the structure. Again, we're transitioning to a maritime forest. There's not a lot of sand moving around on the site, but to the extent that there is any, we do meet that standard by being the lowest horizontal member is fully 2 feet above the highest grade under the building. The Conservation Commission, as I noticed, approved a notice of non-significance for the septic area, stating that that portion of the lot is a non-significant coastal dune, again mirroring the earlier DEP finding that was the same some years earlier, and that allowed the Board of Health to permit the project. And just as a side note, there's a rule in the town of Sandwich that you can put a septic system in a coastal dune if you get a notice of non-significance. That rule was designed for this lot the last time we permitted it. It was such an arduous thing, but that was the methodology, that the reason for that rule was this lot, and we're pleased that it's there, and we've got a memo from the health director stating that the permit is still valid in terms of the variance, which was nice. It doesn't expire. And to the extent that the plan is any different, the only thing I did was change the flood zone. They added a foot to it, so everything else is identical. Septic is unchanged. The well is already in, by the way. So a modest amount of fill, about 1 to 2 feet, is in the septic disposal field, and that's just going to bring that at or slightly above the base flood elevation, and you get that full 5 foot of separation to groundwater from the bottom of the leaching. That's required by Title V and also the local Board of Health standards. The pump chamber and the tank are watertight, sealed, and the effluent is pumped up there by a pump. And so because everything is watertight per code, it won't even be affected by a 100-year storm, which is, they don't call it 100-year, they call it 0.1% recurrence interval, but that's the design storm, and would still be okay. Because there's no basement and it's an open pile with 50% open slats, both the house and the garage easily meet the FEMA requirements for construction in the Stillwater AE flood zone. The flood waters simply flow under the building and then back out unobstructed, even in a full 100-year flood event. One of the things you look at is that we're going to endanger the public by having this house here, and I can assure you that it's safely well above the flood elevation and will not be impacted whatsoever. The abutting properties are built up on much higher ground, over 10 feet above our lot, and so they're unaffected by any of the flood issues. You know, if the still water comes in and goes back out, they're 10 feet higher than us, minimum. And you can see that on the site plan, the steep grades that go up on either side. So it's therefore evident under the standards of 4352 that those are met by the proposal. The items A through D are explained and expanded on. I did just buzz through each one to make sure we hit them. Again, susceptibility under 4352A, the susceptibility of the proposed facility and the contents to flood damage and the effect of such damage on the site and the surrounding property. As we described, the open pile, FEMA-compliant foundation system, watertight Title V septic system with a raised leaching field, and the first floor set up at 16.5, which is 2.5 feet above the base flood elevation, will ensure there's none to minimal damage to the site during a design flood. And again, this is still water flooding. It's not a V-zone like you'd be looking at on one of the outer beaches. All utilities are elevated at or above the first floor. Natural grades of the surrounding properties rise over 10 feet above locus, ensuring they will be unaffected by flood events occurring on our property. 4352B, the availability of alternative locations for the proposed use which are not subject to flooding or erosion. Locus would point out is an approved subdivision lot shown on a definitive subdivision approved under the subdivision control law with a roadway constructed per the design standards applicable at the time and a release from covenant by the Sandwich Planning Board. We got the engineering and planning board files on that. And there was discussion on the release of the bond on the road, and he had to move two little piles at the end of the road, which I noticed are still there, but we'll let them go. It's just a little bit of gravel past our lot. And the proposed home has been located as landward as possible in the parcel, as you can see, and elevated to prevent impact from flooding. The site is far landward from the primary dune system and has transitioned into a maritime forest per the Mass DEP notice of non-significance, and then later reiterated by your local conservation commission. They are the authority having jurisdiction currently on that. The site is currently stable with respect to erosion, being in a still water flood zone, well back from the ocean, and its wave effects. So I think under 4352B, you could make your findings that it is safe. 4352C is the necessity of the facility to a waterfront location where applicable. It's not applicable here. The single family is in an area of existing single family homes, and it's not proximate to the waterfront. 4352D, a determination that relief requested is the minimum necessary. It's respectfully requested the board make a determination that the proposed modest dwelling on a 1-acre lot has only the minimal grading necessary to protect the environment with a conforming septic leaching and a minimal impact of the open pile foundation, a gravel pervious driveway, and the subsurface septic is meeting the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, and grant the minimum relief necessary to construct the dwelling on the lot. No variances from the Sandwich zoning bylaw floodplain bylaws are required. 4355, you need assurance that all necessary permits have been attained. As Attorney Revere stated, the order of conditions is valid. It's Mass DEP file number 66, 1947. It's been issued. The decision was not appealed. It's recorded in Deed Book 35337, page 1. The notice of non-significance is recorded in Deed Book 35337, page 24, and the plan of record is a site plan dated 1/19/22 by our firm, Down Cape Engineering, Inc. Number 2, order conditions, Mass General Law. The Sandwich Conservation covers the Mass General Law 13140. They issue 2 different findings, so that's all set. See number 1. Mass DEP Chapter 91, that's for waterways riparian, it's not applicable. Select Board Public Access License, not applicable. Water Quality Cert, Mass DEP, not applicable. Board of Health Disposal Construction Permit, that's pending. We passed in the plan, the approved plan, and the building plans. They were, at the time, concerned about the conservation matters, and so I gave them permission to just bench it until we're done with that. But again, I've had direct conversation with Dave Mason, who is a longtime former agent, and been in contact with current staff, and it all appears to be in good order. The variance for the construction of the septic system in the non-significant coastal dune has been issued and is in effect, allowing the project to proceed. Board of Health well permit is required under number 7. The permit issued and the well has been installed and tested. You can see the location as you drive in on the right, close to the abutter. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers program general permit not applicable. Individual permit not applicable. Com of Mass Chapter 293 dam safety permit not applicable. And then under 4390, no fill may be placed on any lot, any portion of it which is at or below the base flood elevation without a special permit. So that's your responsibility as this board to make sure that we're not, to use the last term, about creating a huge dam which would push waters onto a neighbor or something like that. In a coastal environment, it's extremely hard to affect. The Atlantic Basin is basically a huge area, and little bits of fill here and there simply do not affect the water level. It's respectfully requested that a special permit be granted for the conservation-approved slight regrading and fill shown on the site plan. The area is a coastal flood zone, and the de minimis amount of fill proposed will in no way adversely affect locusts or the surrounding properties. And I cited a Mass DEP case that's right on point if you need it. So that was the findings you folks have to make. I would just note that it's referenced that I sent a memo to Dave DeCana. I think that was brought up. I absolutely did. I stand by that. Every word is accurate and true. Arlene, of late today, gave you a memo that, and his face looks a little scary. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Well, it's the same things we've been talking about for about a year now, but as she says, the grading was not shown. Yes, the site plan does show exactly what we're going to do there. She falsely claims that the grade at the garage door is 15.1. It isn't. The finished first floor is 16.5. That's one thing she got accurate. It also shows a pile-supported deck. Well, obviously that was always approved. Her next point was on the bottom of her first page. She says the A08 shows a finished grade of 13.7. Well, now she got it right. That's accurate. And then the lowest horizontal structural member next to it is 15.7, so that's 2 feet above. And that was purposely designed that way to meet code. And so she says that I didn't state it right. Well, I did state it right. So that's what you have to know about that. And everything is stamped, engineering and professional land surveyor. My reputation is on the line. The other person has no credentials whatsoever with respect to measuring land and grades. Sheet A10 of the architectural shows the perimeter beam under the mudroom and foyer at 15.7, which puts the bottom at 14.7. Again, it's smoke and mirrors. It's off. The 15.5 refers to the back of the building drops off, and so you could have a floor in the back at that level. Again, we're going a little bit higher, but the architectural plans very clearly show it, and we've stated over and over ad nauseum, we're not putting any fill under this building. What you see is what you get. So she complains that she didn't have a chance to look at things, even though that's reiterating the same exact point she's made for, it seems like a year now. So saying that we won't have any oversight is silly. I'll monitor this and make sure that everyone is on the same page. We always do that as professionals, and sign off on every elevation certificates, on certified plot plans, on septic systems, grades, and everything. So to suggest otherwise is just smoke and mirrors. She claims that the septic variance is invalid. It was issued for a different plan. That's silly. It's the identical plan, except you just changed from NGVD 29 to NAVD 88. It's identical, and everyone agrees that except her. This is not the minimum disturbance to develop the lot for residential purposes. Again, it's a modest home. It's on a full 1 acre lot. The dune is trying to become a forest. It's not an open, sandy thing right near a V zone. We're way back. She says that fill will be placed on the site, at least for septic construction. She's right on that, and likely for the garage floor. No, that's not correct. So she's misinforming you there. And she says we don't disclose the fill. It's a tiny amount. It's shown graphically on the plan, non-issue. Based on the fact that it's 100% dune, the dunes are wetland resources, lot has no upland, doesn't meet the area requirement. Again, Paul will handle that, but it's simply grandfathered when that definition came into effect. All the old plans show some wetlands, none on this lot, and then all of a sudden the definitions change, and that's protected. And they say a variance is required for the lack of lot area. Again, that's protected under Mass General Law 48, Section 6. And she just says that we shouldn't approve it until we have resolved everything. But I can assure you everything has been resolved, has been fully vetted. The plans were carefully designed. It's been permitted twice before. This is hopefully the third time a charm. And we'll get a nice little home in there. And the neighbors who have the symptoms of not in my backyard, I think will, in a few short weeks, accept it and see that it's not the end of the world to have a little house next to them. Be glad to answer any questions if they do come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I did forget a couple of very simple things for you. One is the applicant over here is this woman in the pretty shirt. Her name is Cheryl Kroll. She is the owner of the property. If you're wondering, sort of looking back, it's like, well, why now? The answer is very simple, and that is Ms. Kroll received the company from her ex-husband, or the lot from her ex-husband, and she has been pursuing permitting for the property now in there so that she can use the funds to take care of her children and things like that. This property, people have been looking at permitting for a while. I won't go into all of the issues, but I have the 1985 decision saying the whole lot is a dune, sent to, of all people, Arlene Wilson. She knows the whole property's been a dune. I actually have the time of, it was at 1 hour, 32 minutes and 52 seconds on the 7/22 meeting that Dan Ojala said to the whole Conservation Commission, the whole property is a dune. It's not news to anybody. Just one other brief thing I wanted to mention is it was brought up a couple times in letters by my brother. This is a lawyer thing. They call each other brothers and sisters. I never had it until I moved back to Massachusetts. But he says, well, maybe this property needs a variance. I sent a brief memo this afternoon to the building commissioner, and I said, don't try to figure this out now. But the property became not owned by any adjacent property in 1972 when Cape Holdings, who owned the property, deeded all of the land, the remainder of the land that they own, which is all the dunes and Sandy Neck right in that area, to the town of Sandwich, February 2nd, 1972. This was the last lot that they owned. At that time, the town of Sandwich had no definition of lot area. In 1975, a definition of lot area came into effect, but this lot was by itself. As I said before, 21 Quiet Way, May 15th, 2024. The same issue was asked. Mr. Brennan's response was, well, it's my decision to decide it when I get a building permit application. And that is still his decision. And my memo to him was merely to show that there's a lot of clear evidence that I will put forward to you in the future on that, and I'm not going to go over it with the board tonight. So I want to thank you very much for listening to Dan and I, and I'm sure you'd rather ask a question of Dan than of myself, but we're both here.
Thank you very much. Brendan, do you have any comments or concerns at this time?
Not entirely. I did receive Attorney Revere's memo this afternoon. For the most part, I think what is mentioned here appears to be correct. This lot was created back in 71, 72, prior to any definition of a lot. So it seems to me that what's in here for the most part is accurate.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the board have any questions for the applicant or?
Is there anything on any of these plans that indicates how much fill is going to be brought to the site for purposes of that septic system, so that we may properly evaluate whether or not the special permit should be issued?
Sure, Mr. Crane. Through the chair, it's graphically shown in the back here. You can see that there's about a foot and a half of fill in the area of the septic system. So I could give you a quick estimate on that, but you can see the ground up here is 15, 18 foot higher. It's a very small bump, comparable to the bump that's over here that's naturally occurring. It only goes up about a foot and a half in most places. So we could give you a quick estimate on that, but you're talking about a foot and a half over the size of a septic system. That's all that's needed.
We should probably have a number,
Let me give you a number in a minute. I'll crunch that out.
total cubic
Yeah,
yards.
the number of cubic yards that are imported, and again, none under the house, and the gravel on the driveway is already in place, so no changes over there.
So you're going to work that number up now?
Yeah, I'll give you an estimate, whether it's 70 yards or whatever it is. Yep.
Right. In the meantime, we're going to open this meeting up to the public for comment. Attorney Brian Wall is representing one of the neighbors. He had requested to speak. Arlene Wilson had requested to speak. And then we'll let the members of the general public speak. I ask that you speak into the microphone, state your name and your address, and be concise and civil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Brian Wall. I have an office at 90 Route 6A here in Sandwich. And tonight I'm here representing Carolee Prasia, who happens to be the owner of the property immediately next door. And I'm going to confine my comments. I submitted a letter. I'm just going to stick to telling you a little bit about my client and then talking for a minute about this order of conditions issue. So my client has lived at, she lives in New York, but she owns the property at 40 Leonard Road, and she's been there for many years. She has observed an intermittent stream that flows through her property to the subject property, and she's seen water at varying levels in that stream throughout the time that she's owned the property. And at times she has observed standing water on the petitioner's property. And it's our understanding that what the septic system plan calls for is a mounded septic system, so that's going to change the grade. And she's concerned that this changing of grade and bringing in the fill that was just being discussed could change the topography and cause her some flooding. And we're here tonight because this project needs a special permit under your floodplain requirements, and obviously flooding is a concern of the board and of the abutters. That segues to my point about the order of conditions. We all know that when permitting a project in Massachusetts, it has to go to each board, because each board that has jurisdiction has expertise over that particular area. And in this particular case, the project had to go before Historic, I believe, and it also had to go before the Conservation Commission for a permit, and you heard a lot about that history. In one of the submittal requirements for the floodplain overlay district special permit is that the applicant certifies to you, that's the word that the bylaw uses, certifies that they have all of the necessary permits, and then it lists all the permits that are supposed to be shown. And the applicant has appeared before you tonight saying that he or she has a permit from 2002. But there have been events that have occurred since then that I think the board should be aware of. And I'm just going to tick through them very briefly. The order of conditions, normally what it does is it approves a site plan, very much like the one we're looking at now, which is a two-dimensional plan that shows the footprint of the proposed structure. In this particular instance, the permit requires, after the order of conditions was issued, that building plans be submitted. And the reason why that is because one of the interests that the Conservation Commission looks at with regard to permitting in a dune is that the dune sands need to be able to shift and blow about with the wind. And so when the commission is permitting projects in dunes, they're concerned not only about a two-dimensional plan, but about a three-dimensional plan. And what happened was in November of 2003, last year, the petitioner came before the commission and submitted the building plans. And there was a debate and a dispute as to whether or not those plans reflected and were consistent with the plans that were approved by the commission insofar as the site plan is concerned. And now I'm not an engineer, I'm not even going to talk about those details. All I'm going to say to you is there was a problem at the commission, and the commission voted that it would not approve the plans that were presented that night. and it voted to require a new notice of intent to be filed. At or about that time, an abutter, not my client, but another abutter, filed before the commission what's called a request for determination of applicability to determine the extent of the dunes on the property. The commission voted a positive determination, which basically declared that all of the dunes on the property, let me rephrase that, the entire property is all dune, and all of the dune is significant, which put into debate this notice of non-significance that you've heard. The petitioner appealed that determination to the DEP, but the DEP affirmed it and said that yes, the dunes go all throughout the property and they are significant. And the letter that was transmitted with regard to the DEP decision said that the petitioner should clarify the plans. That decision was not appealed. The decision of the commission to require a new notice of intent was appealed. Now, what we heard just before this meeting, like this week, Mr. DeCanto submitted a memorandum that said last week the commission had an executive session at which the commission voted to rescind that requirement about the new notice of intent. All we know about what happened that night is that memo, because it happened in executive session. What I would suggest to you is that the open meeting law requires that the commission convene in a public session at a public meeting and affirm what it said in the executive meeting so that the public is aware of what happened, and that hasn't happened yet. Furthermore, what I would suggest to you is that the appeal of the commission's decision to require the filing of a new notice of intent is still pending. So now let me kind of bring it back to what's really before you tonight. Why does your bylaw say that the applicant should come before you with a final order of conditions and certify to you that that's the case, so that you don't have to listen to presentations about primary frontal dunes and flood zones and shifting sands and all this other jargon that the commission reviews? You should just simply be able to hang your hat on the fact that there's a valid, unquestioned, unequivocal order of conditions before you so that you can then move on. And what I'm suggesting to you is that the state of affairs right now is not that. There is an order of conditions, but it's in question. There have been contrary determinations of applicability, and there's still a pending appeal regarding that decision by the commission that Mr. DeCanto reported on. So I would respectfully submit to you that the applicant has not given you the information that you need in order to proceed on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Wall. Arlene Wilson, if you'd like to speak, please.
Thank you. Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates. We represent the abutter to the west of the property across the street, 25 Leonard Road Nominee Trust. And again, I've provided the board with 2 letters. The first letter has the attachments that have, some of which have been talked about here tonight, including DEP's determination finding. There's a colored section of the site plan that shows the intermittent stream that Mr. Wall's client is concerned about. My client is also concerned about that because if that stream gets blocked, the road floods, and that limits access to his property, particularly for emergency vehicles. So the issue of flooding, as it's written in your bylaw, I believe is not just flooding from the ocean, but flooding that a project might cause on neighbors' properties by blocking floodways that currently exist. The septic system here is going to be built in a mound right at the end of that particular intermittent stream. It's now a depression in the ground, so the water runs through that channel and then disperses in that little basin area. There won't be a basin area when this gets through. The plan discrepancies, which Mr. Ojala suggests are smoke and mirrors and not very important. The problem is, and I know some of you from years ago, you've been involved tangentially at least with development of various sorts over the years. What happens is the site contractors get the site plan. The builders who are building the house get the architectural plans. If they don't match, then the structure that gets built has all kinds of problems relative to the grades on the site. So it's really important. The fact that the grade on the site plan is 1.5 feet higher than the grade at the garage doors on the architectural plan can result in the building not being as high as is required. And although Mr. Ojala's memo says, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be 2 feet higher just the way it's supposed to be, nobody's going to have that memo when they build this thing. They're going to build according to the plans. So it's really important that the plans work with each other, as well as with the site and the permits that they have. The septic system variance is contingent upon a plan that was developed in 2010. It may well be that the only change in that plan is the datum that got updated, but updating the datum changes the flood line. There's a memo in my first letter from Dave Mason to the current health director saying that as long as the plan is the same as the one that was approved, the variance continues to be good because it doesn't have an expiration date, but the plan's not the same. So the variance as it stands today is not good. They need to go back to the Board of Health and get that straightened out. Fill in the dune. I spent a little time this afternoon trying to figure out how much fill there was going to be. I agree with Mr. Ojala. It looks like it's about 70 cubic yards. That's not nothing. That's a fair amount of material. I do disagree with him that there won't be any fill in the driveway. According to this plan and the order of conditions, the driveway gets to be firmed up, if you will, so people can drive on it without getting stuck, by adding 10 inches of compacted stone. But they can't change the grade, so they have to excavate that 10 inches and then bring in more fill. That's another 12 cubic yards or so. I know that it probably isn't a concern of this board, but it should be a concern of whoever buys this place, that if there is no firm grade inside the garage, and the garage floor has some significant slope on it, then it's going to be really hard not to get your car stuck in there. I won't go over the order of conditions again. That problem's been discussed. I don't understand, and perhaps having the decision discussed in public eventually will help clarify how the commission could require a new notice of intent in December of last year for the same plans that they now say are okay. The only difference is the members who were at the executive session meeting, as far as I can see, most of whom have no history with this project. They didn't sit on the original proposal. They didn't sit on the presentations about the current plans either. I'll let the lawyers argue out about the upland versus wetland issue I know that there is a case in Mashpee that was very similar to this, where the original lot was created before the bylaw got changed to be very similar to yours, and the court found that the lot didn't have the required amount of upland because the lot was entirely in a floodplain. This one's entirely in a dune. So I just urge you to consider carefully what could happen here and to require the applicant to provide you with plans that work with one another and to prove that they have all the required permits that your bylaw requires them to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other member of the public wish to speak upon this permit? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Julie Barry. I'm an attorney representing 25 Leonard Road Nominee Trust, and I'm going to defer mostly to everything that Arlene said. And I just want to echo what Attorney Wall said, that this board doesn't have what it needs before it to make this decision tonight, that the Conservation Commission may have had an executive session whereby it determined certain things. Mr. Ojala is not a member of the Conservation Commission. I don't see any authority by which he can report out what happened in an executive session, but nonetheless, there hasn't been public notice or opportunity for anybody to be heard about what apparently was the Commission's decision to change its mind from a previous decision requiring a new notice of intent, which Ms. Kroll has appealed, and that appeal is still pending in Superior Court. It has not been dismissed. So until there is something definitive from the Conservation Commission, as Attorney Wall correctly pointed out, that means that you all are somehow being tasked with trying to determine whether this project meets the Conservation Commission's bylaw or the State Wetlands Protection Act, which isn't your role here. So we would respectfully suggest, in addition, I hadn't even seen Attorney Revere's letter, so I haven't had any opportunity to look at it and perhaps provide comment. So we would suggest respectfully that at very least this hearing should be continued until such time that everyone's had the opportunity to weigh in on Mr. Revere's late filed letter this afternoon. I'm sorry, what was this? I have that. I don't know what that interruption was about, but in any event, until such time as there is an actual decision from the Conservation Commission concerning its decision to somehow waive its requirement that a new notice of intent be required. And I rely on Ms. Wilson's letter and her comments and the inconsistency between the plans, which, although it's been dismissed as silly a number of times by a fellow professional, it nonetheless bears review and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak or have any comments or concerns? To the board, where do you think, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you coming, sir.
Hi, Robert George, 401 Service Road. I think this piece of property has been in question for a long time, and I went down with the Conservation Department and looked at it last year, and from my understanding, the zoning was changed, I guess, into the floodplain, and if that's true, it's right in the dunes, it's in right next to conservation area, and if it's in the floodplain, how can you build in the floodplain? That's one of my big questions. That never got answered. I went down with Josh Wrigley, and from what I understand, he's no longer with us. But I don't know. I've hunted that area. It's all wetlands, marsh, swamp, cranberry bog. I just wanted to add that to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How do the members of the board feel? Do you feel like you have enough information to close and deliberate, or do you looking for certain items that you think we need to review further before we get to that point?
Through the chair,
I think,
I'd love a chance to rebut a little.
what's that?
Would love a chance to rebut some of the misinformation. I mean, it's
That's
blatantly-
fine, but I'm not even sure we should even get into it. I suspect that things were done in an executive session because there's litigation still pending. And if the bylaw specifically enumerates that an order of conditions is something that we should have in existence before we make a decision, I think that's an issue that has to be resolved.
Okay, look, can I address your,
No.
okay?
And I also believe Arlene's comment about the fact that the architectural plans should be consistent with the site plans. I haven't seen an architectural plan, and I'm no architect or building designer, but I do think that if there is an inconsistency there, that should be cleared up on the plans that are on file with the town. And I assume that the 70 cubic yards, there was a talk about an intermittent stream, but I assume that the 70 cubic yards that you're talking about, Dan, are within some kind of a structure so that it's not going to leach out into this intermittent stream to block the stream or something along those lines.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Crane. The so-called intermittent stream, which really is just the end of a drainage ditch on the abutter's property. This shows up on a 1963 plan recorded in Plan Book 188, page 79. It's important because there is a culvert under Leonard Road, and if you block that up, it would back up, and that would be a problem. We absolutely are not going to do that. The good thing about a dune, it's sandy, and what does sand do? It infiltrates water very quickly. So you can see that on this plan, it's plotted out that it stops on their lot, 20, 30 feet short of our lot, and it infiltrates into the ground almost all the time right there. And the fill, you're exactly right, it's not going to interrupt. There's a low point between the house and the septic system where if we get a probable maximum precipitation event, some gigantic flood, the water will harmlessly go underneath. Our house is way up. You can't flood the ocean, so by definition, the water could never get higher than the flood zone because you could flood the ocean infinitely with a little bit of rain. So there's absolutely no question that the neighbors are 100% not impacted by this development. As it's shown, there's no regrading whatsoever on that low point that heads to the north, to the west of the septic system. So, and I agree with the 70 to 75 cubic yard assessment. It's a pretty token amount. Again, you know, the vote to require the new NOI was improperly advertised. We were there for an amendment to, they wanted me to put a little turning T on, and all of a sudden they turned, and because of Arlene's gibberish, they said, oh, well, we want a new NOI. Well, that wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't discussed. We weren't prepared for it. It wasn't advertised. That was not a valid vote, and it was rescinded. Arlene was listening in the foyer to the executive session, so she knew right what they did, and knew the attorney when he walked out exactly. We both heard the decision, so she knew instantly what it was. And again, it was just repealing a bad vote. We have a valid order of conditions, unappealed, on record, a notice of non-significance. Again, it's a dune. You wouldn't even need a notice of non-significance if it wasn't a dune, because if you look at the language, it clearly states that the whole lot is a dune. So a lot of things, but I won't expand unless you want me to. I would like to make a few other points if I could.
The so-called valid order of conditions, when did that issue?
That was about 2 years ago. We had about a year left on it. And would
August 2022. It's issued, it's recorded, it's listed in the application. It is valid. It's completely valid. In fact, as I was pointing out, Josh Wrigley said they have a valid order of conditions, but there are some questions about plans and issues, and we submitted that material. The Conservation Commission voted to rescind the request for the new refiling NOI, new notice of intent. And the reason is because the plans were submitted to them, which the order of conditions sits there. I mean, one of the things, and it was just brought up, when was the order of conditions issued? August 2022. And I think a few of you are old enough. Do you remember Dean Smith and the Four Corners basketball? Run out the clock. That's what the neighbors are trying to do, is run out the clock in this matter. We're trying to get this thing through so it can be done. We have the permit in place. The appeal that they're talking about, I did not file, Mr. Fitch filed it behind me, was they can't order us to file a new order of conditions. They didn't even revoke the old one. And
What about the issue that's been raised that the plans upon which the old order of conditions was based are different than these plans?
So the plan that is in that order of conditions is that plan right there. And the topography is exactly what's on the ground, and what we're proposing is exactly that. It's all trying to confuse things, muddy the water, you know, the Mississippi River runs through it. I mean, we've heard it all. But that plan is accurate to a T. The highest corner of the garage is the southeast corner. It's 13.7 feet NAVD 88 above sea level. The bottom of that beam will be 2 feet above it. That's all you need to know. The Conservation Commission thoroughly vetted it. I certified it. That's what will be done. There's absolutely no question. It unequivocally meets all the FEMA Building Department and conservation requirements. And to say otherwise is silly. And you'd have to laugh. I love Attorney Wall, but, you know, oh, the DEP wanted the clarification on the plans. What they wanted clarified was, it would be nice if you clarified that the whole lot was a coastal dune. That was the clarification they wanted. But there's a notice of non-significance stating that it filed concurrently with that order that says that it is a coastal dune. And so, you know, to make an issue out of that, I think is not exactly forthright. You know, a suggestion that we put a note that it's a coastal dune when it's very obviously one. That's the only thing that they did. And again, the RDA is not significant with respect to a standing order. Its case law is very clear on that. It's unappealed, it's valid, it's in effect. Everything that I've said and certified is true, and it's just constant mudslinging and, oh, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the shutters are too big. You know, it's never ends. Thank you.
Did you give Kevin a number, or give us a number of fill?
Yeah, 75 cubic yards, round figures.
Thank you. All right, anyone else from the public like to speak to this permit? I see none. Nobody lurking. Okay.
Just like to point out, this is Julie Berry again, that when people are relying on ad hominem attacks to influence this board, that Ms. Wilson is silly, that something is not accurate, or that that the Mississippi runs through it, there's a mischaracterization of the things that were said in that letter in order to gain additional sympathy or whatever. I think the board should be concerned about those comments, and repeatedly calling a fellow professional who happens to be a woman who's been in this business a long time silly multiple times should perhaps perk your ears.
Thank you very much.
I would apologize if I disrespected Ms. Wilson. She's been around for a very long time. She was a Barnstable Conservation Commissioner. You can Google her. She's got a long history of work, and she's very good at what she does. But I would also say that the first thing she ever did was tell a lie about, oh, something's happened upstream to make the stream flow. It's completely false. Just lie after lie. And
Okay, I think you've made that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
All right, to the board. Is the board comfortable enough with the information we have to close and move on, or do you think we should continue it until, Kevin, you're comfortable with the additional information you were looking at and the information from the conservation?
I suppose we could condition what we do on getting a document from conservation that clearly delineates that what is being represented to us is true and accurate, that the plans that they have before them now were the same plans that were before them at the time they approved. And I don't know whether that memo, I didn't see that memo. So, it may have been in my pile of information, but I didn't take note of it. But if that's clear enough for everybody, then I don't have an issue with it. But well, what's the pending permit at this juncture? The Conservation Commission has issued it, right? At least that's what's being suggested.
The pending litigation?
Maybe you can give me a clarification, or give us a clarification, Brian, on what the pending litigation is, and does it relate to that original order of conditions? Paul, one of you?
Appeal, rather.
Brian can certainly come up here with me if he wants to add to it. As was stated in here, as Josh stated, We know, no one disagrees, that in, I believe it was mid-December, the Conservation Commission voted to require the filing of a new new notice of intent. Okay? Mr. Fitch back here actually reached out to Mr. Princey, who reached out to me, but then Mr. Fitch actually filed the litigation saying, you don't have authority, you have to revoke the order of conditions if you want someone to file for a new one. They didn't have authority to do that because there was nothing false done, etc. So a certiorari action was filed. The sole claim was saying, look, you can't vote to require us to file a new notice of intent when we have an existing order of conditions except in limited circumstances. Okay? That is pointed out, and that, I'm sorry, Ms. Berry, it was Mr. DeCanto's memo, which was in the file sent last Friday, that said, in executive session, the Conservation Commission voted to no longer require the filing of a new notice of intent. It was not my memo, and that's what he was trying to hand you. In any event, and that was, without getting into part of, I'll say, my twisting arms and saying, you can't do this, and this is what you do, and plans were submitted. Mr. Ojala submitted plans addressing a number of these issues and pointing out how the whole lot is a dune. It has always been considered to be a dune. The minutes from the meeting in July 2022. Now, I did ask my brother if he's looked at that litigation, if he thinks I mischaracterized it.
No,
He certainly is.
I think Mr. Revere properly characterized it, but I don't think he finished the thought. The decision of the commission back in November or December of 2023 was to require the filing of a new notice of intent and a statement that the commission was not going to sign off on the plans that were presented at that time. Now, we've heard from Mr. DeCanto on Friday, I didn't see it till this week, purportedly the commission has voted to rescind that, but the appeal is still pending. So, in this...
But that decision by Concom would render that appeal moot, wouldn't it?
Maybe, because we don't really know what it is, because it was an executive session and there's been this memorandum. And what I would suggest is that the board continue this for a few weeks to wait and see what happens with that. But yeah, Mr. Revere properly characterized it, but the appeal is still pending. Whatever happened at the commission on Wednesday has not been effectuated at all. And there are other interested parties, so even though they do that, it may not be the end of that litigation. So my point is that your bylaw requires the applicant to certify to you that there's an order of conditions, and I would suggest that given the state of affairs in totality, that that's in doubt and in question.
Unless, I suppose, the applicant can certify that they do have a valid order of conditions.
Which we do. We have a recorded order of conditions. Okay.
Okay, then. So where do we stand on this? I'm a little confused. I'll be honest.
Well, I'll make a motion to close and take it under advisement.
Okay, I'll look for a second on that then. All in favor?
Is that just a clarify, as opposed to a
Continuation.
Yes.
My only question is the memo the decision, or is there a separate document that records?
Through the chair, I had a conversation with Mr. DeCanto, and I brought up the same questions that the board has brought up, particularly since it was an executive session. So it is my understanding on my conversation and what was listed by Mr. DeCanto is that the order of condition exists, that the information provided in the memo was cleared by town council to be provided to the board and Attorney Rivera and all. So that's where we're at. I mean, you may look at it as if it's an existing order of conditions, it's under appeal, and it's at the applicant's risk, as you know, when a special permit is issued, that we always say, you know, if it's appealed, that's, you know, you carry it out at your own risk.
All right, so are you comfortable with the motion to close?
I'll second it.
You'll second it?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're going to move on to new business right now. Number 24-18, 4 Ocean Road, special permit. The Sandwich Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on the application of Magner Family Nominee Trust, applicant and property owner, for a special permit under sections 1330, 2420, and 4352, in parentheses, of the Sandwich Protective Zoning Bylaw for property located at 4 Ocean Road, East Sandwich, Mass., Assessors Map Number 70, Parcel Number 19, for the purpose of changing, altering a pre-existing non-conforming dwelling in the floodplain. The public hearing will be held on August 27th, 2024, at Sandwich Town Hall, 130 Main Street, Sandwich, Mass., at 6 p.m. The public record information can be viewed at the Planning and Development Office. We have a comment letter from Brendan Brines, the building commissioner. A square-foot takeoff from the proposed plot plan by way of the Foxit software measuring tool suggests a total footprint of all structures, decks, and stairways of 1,478 square feet, or 29% of lot coverage. This exceeds the permitted coverage of 25% by 4%. Clarification of actual lot coverage should be sought from the land surveyor and shown on a certified plot plan. And that is the only comment letter. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there we go. We do have one from Dave DeCanto, Director, Department of Natural Resources. The Conservation Commission has reviewed the request for special permit number 24-18, 4 Ocean Road, East Sandwich, Mass. The Commission reviewed the applicant's project and issued an order of conditions effective 7/12/24, permit number SE66-2020 in compliance with the Mass Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Sandwich Wetlands Bylaw. A copy of the order is attached to this memo. The Commission does not have any comments regarding the special permit request, other than the applicant must comply with the order of conditions. Okay. Ready to go, Attorney Wall.
Yes, good evening again, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Brian Wall, I'm an attorney here in town. My address is 90 Route 6A, Sandwich, and I'm here tonight together with Ann McNevich, representing the applicant, which is the Magner Family Trust. And what is before you is a proposed project to raise the existing structure and replace it with a new structure. And what is required for the project to proceed is a special permit to alter a pre-existing non-conforming structure, and also a special permit under your floodplain provisions. I think this will be more simple than the last one, so I'm going to just kind of go through it. I think it's a garden variety project. The property is at 4 Ocean Road. It's a 5,000 square foot lot with 50 feet of frontage. It's improved with a 1-bedroom single-family cottage that has a footprint of 396 square feet. It does have a deck and a shed, and when those are added, the total square footage of the footprint is 739 square feet. The structure was built in 1955. The lot is of record as of 1946. It's in an R2 district, and I would suggest the lot is non-conforming. 60,000 square feet is currently required, and it's got 5,200 feet of frontage is required, and it has 50. The house does not meet front or side setbacks. And again, the proposal is to raise that structure and to rebuild a new 2-bedroom dwelling that will have a flood-compliant foundation with flood vents. The total footprint of the new structure will be 940 square feet, and when the deck and shed are added, it will be, I got 1,517 versus what Mr. Bride said with 1,478. I guess we can refer to the plan to try to figure that exactly out. It's in a flood zone, an AE flood zone, which means that under your definition of lot area, the lot actually has 0 area. With regard to your special permit requirements, I know the board is very familiar with them. So the first is the proposed project will not create a nuisance hazard or congestion. And I would suggest that the replacement of a 70-year-old non-flood compliant structure with a new flood compliant structure is in the interests of the bylaw and will not create a nuisance hazard or congestion. The house is definitely getting bigger. As I said, we calculated as 1,500 square feet roundabout, and Mr. Bride's is at 1,478. I would note for the board's attention, the property across the street at 3 Ocean is 1,632, and the one at 7 is 1,428. So the new proposed structure is going to be right in line with the structures that are in the neighborhood already. The project will not result in substantial harm to the neighborhood. So what the applicant is trying to do is, the existing conditions plan shows the house very close to Ocean Road with a bit of a backyard, and it's also very close to one of the side lot lines. What the applicant wants to do is center the house a little bit better on the lot by moving it back from the front yard and centering it away from the setbacks. So there are nonconformities, but those are being reduced. The front and the side yard setbacks are getting better with the proposed project. The project is increasing in size, and if this were not in a floodplain, I would agree with Mr. Bride's analysis that the structure would actually be over the lot area that would be required in the R2 district. But my response to that is twofold. One is, it's in the floodplain, so it's actually got 0 area, and so therefore the existing structure is already non-conforming as to lot coverage, and your bylaw allows an existing non-conformity to be increased or even intensified. And so even though we are increasing the size of the dwelling and increasing the lot coverage, you can permit that under your bylaw, and it's a very small lot, 5,000 square feet. The total occupied will be about 1,500, so there's still a fair amount of area around the property. It's centering it, so it's actually, even though lot coverage, my view of lot coverage is it's to control density and size. So the centering of the house makes it a better project than what is currently there. And again, as I mentioned, it's very much in line with the other houses that are in the area. The next provision is the requested relief may be granted without any derogation from the bylaw. I would just refer to the 2 arguments that I made for that particular prong. The objectives of the district will be satisfied. The R2 district is to provide for lower density residential development for those uses allowed in the R1 zone while protecting the quality of air, surface water, and groundwater. Again, replacing an old non-flood compliant structure with one that is we would submit better for the neighborhood and consistent with your bylaw. We also require a floodplain zoning bylaw, a special permit. And to jump right into those criteria, the first is the susceptibility of the proposed facility and the contents to flood damage and the effect of such damage upon the site and surrounding property. Again, currently it's non-flood compliant. The proposed structure will be elevated on a foundation that has flood vents. So this is going to enhance this particular prong that you have in your bylaw. The second is the availability of alternative locations for the proposed use which are not subject to flooding. The entire lot is subject to flooding, so no matter what we do, that's going to be an issue. But by making it a flood compliant structure, it's better than what is there now. The third is the necessity of the facility for a waterfront location. Where applicable, that's not applicable, we're not on the waterfront. And fourth, a determination that the relief requested is the minimum necessary. And I think the issue here is this: the structure is getting bigger, but there are 2 points to be made. One is currently the structure is sitting on the ground, and therefore to the extent that floodwaters come, the whole structure is going to displace floodwaters. Whereas the new structure is going to have a foundation where the floodwaters will run through it. So it's actually a better, even though lot coverage is increasing, the project is better with regard to flood control and storm damage prevention. So we would therefore submit that it enhances the point that the bylaw is trying to make. And I think that's my presentation. I'm available for questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Brendan, anybody on the board have questions for Attorney Wall or concerns?
I don't have a question, no.
Can you comment about your determination?
Yeah, so it does appear that it's more than 25%, but taking a closer look right here on a Google Earth view of the neighborhood, the 2 adjoining houses are substantially bigger and I would say definitely exceed the 25% restriction. This house in question is probably the smallest one in the neighborhood.
I also meant to say I had 2 points. One was about the flood foundation, but I forgot and it slipped my mind. The expansion of the house, it's still only going to be a 2-bedroom. So this isn't a situation where this person is trying to build out to the maximum extent possible. They're going from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom.
Go ahead, Mary.
Are the other adjacent houses, are they centered on the lots as well? Or will this one be now off the plane?
I think Brennan's going to show you the video.
I'm just curious, you know.
I can't really answer that because when I went to the neighborhood, I didn't know where the property lines were, so I can't really answer that direct question. But I would suggest that centering this makes it fit in with the neighborhood better.
It's fine. Fine.
What's the current front yard setback of the existing building?
The current setback is, bear with me. The front setback required is 50, and the existing is 10.1. The minimum side yard is 45, and the existing is 9 feet on the west and 18.7 on the east.
And
Yeah,
what's
there's-
the rear yard setback? I don't see any dimension on that plan for what the rear yard setback technically is another front yard setback, isn't it?
I didn't know what to do with that, Mr. Corain. Technically, I went with where the house fronts, but yeah, the lot has frontage on 2 roads. Yeah.
And with the redesign, is it going to be 50 feet off the back?
No, I think it would be less. That dimension is not shown, but just eyeballing, if the lot's 100 feet deep, the house is more than halfway back. So it would not comply with the rear yard setback.
So isn't that creating a new nonconformity?
If you view that as the rear yard setback, yeah. If it's another front, then it wouldn't be.
Well, it can only have one. I mean, technically it has 2 fronts, but your building technically would be 50 feet. Current zoning requires 50 feet off Beach Road and 50 feet off Ocean Road.
Right.
You're taking advantage of the pre-existing non-conforming situation to be able to build it within 20.5 feet of Ocean, but you have a conforming rear yard setback currently. I presume it's at least 50 feet off Beach Road. So by moving it within 50 feet, I'm assuming Beach Road is, let me just call Beach Road the backyard. Is Beach Road the backyard?
That's the way the property owner treats it, yeah.
So if you're within the 50 feet of Beach Road, then you're creating a new nonconformity, which probably would require variance relief.
If the board agrees with you, then what I would do is ask for a continuance to amend my application.
I thought they changed the law that you only have one.
Mr. Chairman?
No, we're not.
Yes, Brennan.
For zoning purposes, we've always considered the front, the address of the property, and anything other than that would be the rear sides,
Which is Ocean Road.
which is, Ocean Road is the front
John Beachway,
address.
the frontage on
All right, so Attorney Wall,
Yes.
you want to continue until you can,
Yeah, if it's okay with the board,
Yeah.
what I would do is I would continue this and then submit a supplemental request for relief for a variance from the rear yard setback.
how much time are you looking for?
May I ask staff, the submittal requirement for the next deadline?
I mean, the board doesn't necessarily have to agree with me. If the board feels, as Brendan has suggested, that it's a rear yard, but technically it doesn't meet the rear yard setback either.
That's why I'm asking for the variance. I think it's a catch-22.
Could we also,
If I may, maybe for further clarification for the board, through the chair to the building commissioner, on these 5,000 square foot lots, Brendan, what is right, it's 38 6, 8, and what's
In the case of this one with 50.
what would the rear
frontage,
setback be? 20?
In the case of this lot with 50 feet of frontage, normally we would consider 30 front or not more non-conforming than what's there. 6 on one side, 8 on the other, you pick that side, and 20 on the rear.
You can go back to 30% of the length of that lot. So you have to have at least 30 feet from each one of those roads there.
The fact that it's not stated is concerning, you know.
Right, okay. All right, well, I'll ask for a motion to continue this to, what was the date you said? October 8th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll be back on the 8th.
All right, through the chair, just to inform the applicant that the deadline for the October 8th is September 17th.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, again, through the chair, the location. Whoops, the location will be the Sand Hill School.
That's right.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, any board discussion? I think we probably want to move this along. We had planned deliberations for tonight for number 24, or special permit number 24-14, 15 Howland Lane. That was the personal kennel use by Cullen. And again, I think we should just deliberate that one and wait on the other one.
Okay.
If that's it,
Well, let's get through this one first, and we'll
Okay.
take it from there. Okay, the procedural history, this is the application from sections 1330 and 2220 of the zoning bylaw for property located at 15 Howland Lane, which was filed on May 30th, 2024. After proper notice was given, the public hearing was opened on June 25th, 2024, and closed on June 9th, 2024. The application was not accompanied by a site plan. The board reviewed the application and all other materials submitted prior to the close of the public hearing. The board received and gave due consideration to testimony given at the public hearing. The following members attended the public hearing: Neven Terrio, Killian Van Buskirk, and Foley. Findings. Board finds that the Board of Appeals finds that the application meets the requirements of Section 9 Mass General Law, Chapter 40A. The subject property is located within the R2 zoning district. The applicant wishes to operate a personal kennel consisting of 6 dogs accessory to a residential use. The Section 1330 requirements. The board does not find that there are conditions peculiar to this case, but not generally true for similar permitted uses on other sites in the same district. The board finds that nuisance, hazard, or congestion will not be created. The board finds that there will not be substantial harm to the neighborhood. The board finds that there is no derogation from the intent of the bylaw such that the district's objectives will be satisfied. The kennel has been licensed and in operation for 8 years. The building commissioner states that there have been no complaints relative to the kennel operation. Are there any other findings of this?
Is it worth clarifying, because there are 2 definitions, should we explicitly say personal kennel? I think that was a critical, as opposed to just kennel. Is it worth specifying? I would make a motion that we specify personal kennel specifically.
as per the bylaws.
Yes, in the language.
She clearly said on her
Correct.
last response that she was going to follow that to the T.
I second that.
Yeah.
So let's put that into a
Forgive
finding? You're forgiven.
Just anywhere where it,
So do you want to make it
in
as...
those findings where it says
Well,
kennel, I'd like to
we can add
specify
that.
it's personal.
We can just add a finding to the applicant state that
Okay.
this kennel will be for personal use only?
There you go.
Perfect.
Personal kennel, yes. Yes. Thank you. Much improved.
And you want to further state no commercial operation is requested?
Personal. Yeah, I think that's fair. That was clear, yeah.
Okay, so the applicant states that the kennel will be for personal use only, no commercial use is to be requested, is being requested. Okay,
Thanks.
all right. I'll make a motion on the findings if there are none other.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the conditions. At the public hearing, the board considered potential conditions of approval for the special permit. The board voted that the following conditions of approval shall be imposed upon any approval of a special permit, that these conditions are reasonable, and that the applicant and its successor in interest shall be bound by the conditions. Failure to comply with all the conditions set forth in the decision shall terminate the grant of the special permit pursuant to the requirements of the Sandwich Protective Zoning Bylaw, Section 1330. The grant of the special permit shall expire upon either transfer of ownership prior to initiation of substantial construction on or occupancy of the site unless such transfer is authorized in this permit, or if no substantial construction or occupancy takes place within 3 years of the special permit approval, excluding such time required to pursue or await the determination of an appeal referred to in Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 17. Special permit shall not take effect until it's recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, and a copy of the recorded special permit is provided to the Board of Appeals. Special permit is limited for use to the property owner and not open to the public. The kennel shall be limited to the kennel should be limited to dogs owned by the property owner aged 3 months or older. Fecal waste is to be removed off-site and not composted or buried on the site. The commercial boarding and/or training is not permitted. Any other conditions?
Does that language about owned by the property owner, being that we found that there are 6 dogs, does this
So the kennel,
permit those 6 dogs?
the kennel shall be limited to dogs owned by the property owner aged 3 months or older.
That's the written bylaw.
Yeah. I guess if I'm making a motion, I would, to me, condition that it's approval for the 6 dogs housed on the property.
And they can have she can have more than 6.
But she doesn't. I feel like
I don't think you should put the number 6 in there.
we put it in the findings, though, that there's 6 dogs.
Yeah.
I think you should condition it for approval of the 6 dogs that are there. I mean, if she ends up having more dogs, you'd go to the clerk, they'd request, you'd get a new special permit, right?
I don't think that's how this is written, though.
Yeah.
I don't think you can add to the bylaw. We can't, I don't think.
Can we put conditions on things, so can we put a condition?
To limit the amount of dogs?
Is there
Yeah, I
anything
don't
that
think we
says
can.
I don't think we could legally do it.
There is no limit in the bylaw, right?
Right.
So why would we want to do that?
I don't look at it as a limit as much as we found that she has 6. She
We
needs
did
to
that.
register with the clerk, right? That's the purpose,
Yeah, but we
right?
already noted in the findings that she has 6 dogs. But the bylaw doesn't say she can't have more than 6.
Yeah.
I know, I just think she's asking for a permit for the 6 dogs she has, so she can register them with the clerk. Let's give her the special permit for the 6 dogs she has.
Which we are in essence
As a
doing.
Yeah, we
condition
are.
of-
But what if she gets 7? She gets another
Come
dog.
back for another permit.
Well, under the bylaw, we don't have to. It's just that the bylaw specifically states it's for more than 4 dogs. It doesn't say it's more than 4 and less than 10. So I don't think we should get in the business of conditioning it that way. I mean, we're granting the special permit for this use, and that's how the use is defined. We should leave it at that.
I agree.
I don't see how you can.
Because we're creating restrictions that don't exist, and I don't, this is the use. The allowed use is for more than 4 dogs, and we did have a discussion of, should it be changed to be 4, more than 4, but less than something else, but it's not currently written that way.
Yeah, unless it goes to town meeting or whatever, I don't think we can actually change it on our own.
No, I wouldn't want to.
So why do we do conditions? Help me understand that. Why do we write conditions at all? Why don't we just always just use the law? We
Yeah.
often use conditions that use language outside of the law.
Well, we can certainly tighten things up, but we don't go into removing allowed uses for any specific bylaw, which kind of what we'd be doing here, because the bylaw says you can have 10 dogs, and Chase is interested in limiting that in some fashion.
I want to be, I'm not trying to limit it. To me, this is a definition, right? So pack your collection of more than 4 dogs, which the applicant has stated they have 6, right? So, okay. Yes, I do believe and I agree they meet the criteria of personal kennel. With that being said, she's also required to get a special permit for the number of dogs that exceeds 4, right? She has 6, she's asked for a special permit. I think we should permit those 6 dogs. And if for some reason the applicant has 100 dogs, pick any number, they should come back and reapply for the special permit per the law.
I don't think that's the way it reads.
No, I don't see it that way. I just see it, I understand your point.
Okay.
But given the way that the bylaw is written, we're simply granting the special permit, saying, yeah, this is the permit for a personal kennel, this is what you can do with it. This is what you get to do with your personal kennel. Read the definition, that's what you're allowed to do. And if I agree, it's kind of open-ended, but I also think the town doesn't want to get into the business of regulating how many dogs you can have.
Yeah,
What is the right number of dogs?
I'm not proposing I'm simply saying, I think we should permit the number of dogs that the applicant has stated she has. That's what I think we should do.
Okay, duly noted, and I disagree.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so are there any additional findings? Conditions that we want to add?
I don't.
Being none, I will move the conditions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, the decision. After reviewing the application, the plan, and other materials submitted, and after giving due consideration to testimony given at the public hearing, the board hereby approves the special permit application for property located at 15 Howland Lane, as shown on Assessor's Map 48, Parcel 001, for the purpose of operating a personal kennel accessory to a residential use. I will move to approve the special permit.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm going to vote no.
Okay,
Sorry.
Okay.
you got it.
That's your,
You're denying the permit?
Yes.
Okay.
Should reflect that I didn't sit on that.
no. No, I'm going to suggest that we do the deliberations on 40 Leonard at our next meeting. So where do we stand on that?
So it's denied.
It's denied. Okay. All right. If no one's opposed, I'm going to recommend that we deliberate on 40 Leonard at the next meeting. I've got some things that I have to do when the time's getting away from us.
Okay.
Second that.
So what's our schedule like in the next meeting? I know, what do we have? Oh, wait, we have meetings in September?
We have on October 8th is the continuation of For Ocean. Unless you want to meet earlier.
Why don't we just do it October 8th?
Well, I would be open to meeting earlier to just deliberate that.
So the next scheduled meeting would be September 10th
Okay. Well, we could do it
at
remotely.
the Sand Hill School.
You guys want to do it remotely, we could?
I'm available.
What's everybody's thoughts?
I don't know if I could have a computer that'll work anymore.
Everybody's got a computer.
Oh, it's going to be, why is it going to be remote?
I just threw the suggestion out there. If that's all we're going to do is meet and deliberate, we could do it remotely.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But it sounds like that could be problematic, so.
I could, unless I can get one before that.
Why don't we just
I'll just hang out with you.
until October 8th, when we have something else on the agenda?
Okay.
that okay?
The chair's prerogative.
Yeah, I see no reason to rush it. It's been going on forever.
Okay.
All right, so, do I have to make a motion for that? No, we just setting a deliberation date.
Deliberation October 8th, and you'll be at Sand Hill School.
Right, so, again, we're gonna deliberate on 40 Leonard Road. Special permit number 24-16 on October 8th at the Sand Hill School at 6 o'clock. All right. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Whoops, I made it to the end. All right, gang. Do I have to sign anything tomorrow? Okay, yeah, just call me. Oh, yeah, I'll be in there in the morning.